Okay, so I guess we can just ignore the World Government Summit that took place in Dubai between March 29th and 30th of this year, which can be watched on YouTube. The video is almost 7 hours long, and it began with the following.
Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning on what is the first official day of World Government Summit here at Dubai Expo 2020. And the title of this session: are we ready for a new world order?
Anyway, the website description for the World Government Summit is as follows. The World Government Summit 2022 will be held exceptionally in tandem with the closing of Expo 2020 Dubai that brings the world together under the theme Shaping Future Governments. The summit will bring thought leaders, global experts and decision makers from around the globe to share and contribute to the development of tools, policies and models that are essential in shaping future government. Let's play some of the video.
Because I believe what is clear is that we have hit an inflection point. We are certainly living in a unique age of uncertainty and volatility in global affairs.
A volatility by design, I would add.
Whether you are from the global north or the global south, we have all collectively lived through the twilight zone that was the pandemic and the changes to our social, our digital, and our fiscal landscape that COVID-19 wrought. And just as the world re-emerges from the pandemic, we are faced with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which certainly feels like a transformative geopolitical moment.
Yeah, I know. It's like one Hegelian crisis after another. A problem that generates a reaction, and thus a solution is offered to the people as our world is radically transformed. It's also tiresome.
Coming as that does, against a backdrop of great power struggles, the emergence of middle powers, of climate crisis, and cybersecurity challenges, the trend lines certainly seem to indicate a world headed in a disorderly direction.
And this is the crux of it, really. The order out of chaos strategy. Create a world too disordered, chaotic, and filled with uncertainty for people to deal with, in which their very way of life is disrupted and their standard of living is threatened or diminished somewhat by making old systems unworkable, so that the people will scream for their governments to do something to save them. Once the population has been brought to its knees, they will basically accept any dystopian totalitarian system so long as it's better than chaos. We've arrived at this point in history where these Hegelian strategies can work only because our globalist-controlled governments have surrendered our sovereignty and made our countries dependent upon international supply chains and international cooperation and regulation, as opposed to fostering genuine self-sufficiency and economic independence.
What is the alternative?
I believe these kinds of events, similar to the World Economic Forum ones at Davos, are really about shaping public discourse and framing opinion. Events like this are really where mainstream media narratives seem to be developed. I'm going to play a clip now of Dr. Pippa Malmgren. She's an economist and former US presidential advisor.
And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one.
Which, in my opinion, is why we've had on and off lockdowns for the past 2 years. Because the financial system was collapsing and hyperinflation was on the way for a while, but the globalists needed a justification to accomplish multiple goals at once. Not just the mass injecting of a huge portion of the population, but a series of useful crises that could justify an economic transformation. They needed a cover story for the hyperinflation that had been long on the way since our financial system was placed on life support after the 2008 crash. Lockdowns reduced spending and helped to control the velocity of money in the economy. The Ukraine-Russia narrative helps to exacerbate this situation further, and from food shortages, supply chain breakdowns, and rising prices for oil and food, it's possible to trick the public into believing that these things have an authentic source. Once our currencies are worthless and the world is sufficiently chaotic and unstable, people will beg for whatever prepared solution their governments offer them. The Great Reset and a new, tightly controlled world of digital programmable money will likely be that solution.
And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money.
I wouldn't hold my breath that any such Bill of Rights would be all that beneficial, to be honest, considering the current constitutions and bills of rights type documents that we have in this world didn't protect our people from the authoritarian overreach of our governments. But of course, the idea of a record of every single transaction that happens in the economy is quite terrifying. Of course, morons will reply with, "But if you have got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear," except you won't be the one deciding if you've got something to hide and if you've done something wrong. With no cash, you have no freedom. You can't engage in private transactions with another person because the state can see absolutely everything you're doing. You can't do so much as a cash-in-hand type of manual labor nixer, for example. You won't be able to give your kids some cash in a birthday card or give your grandkids some cash or a few coins like you used to do. That'll all be gone, and programmable money will be basically like vouchers, which can be activated and deactivated when the bank or the government see fit, and they can expire over time as well. So you'll only be able to spend this programmable money on the items that they authorize you to, and only for the period of time that they allow. They can also skim a transaction fee off the top whenever they want. They can add automatic carbon levies and other taxes, for example, and they could block your money if you've been found guilty of wrongthink, for example. So this could be the ultimate way of controlling political dissent. It's sort of like having your PayPal account closed. They will have complete control. Anyway, Klaus Schwab spoke at the conference remotely, and he said the following.
We do not yet know the full extent and the systemic and structural changes which will happen. However, we do know that global energy systems, food systems and supply chains will be deeply affected.
Well, at least they're telling us what's coming and what we've been predicting for the past 2 years. It seems like it's unfortunately going to come to pass.
In times of crisis, the role of governments is more important and more relevant than ever. What is also needed is a summit like this one to go beyond crisis management and to look into constructive ways we can build our common future.
You know, it sure is amazing that all the major geopolitical events that transpire in our world seem to always lead to the idea of a one-world government. Because, as we're often told, global crises require global solutions. Take the digital ID, for example. Every single major narrative that dominates this moment in history is leading us to the same end goal. That's quite a coincidence. The introduction of a digital ID. That's where apparently we're going. Yet we're supposed to believe that none of these events are connected. I'm going to wrap up this video on a positive note, however. This is Senator for South Australia Alex Antic, and he recently delivered a great speech in Parliament exposing the World Economic Forum. Here's a few snippets, and I will include the full speech linked below.
Founded in 1971 by Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum is steeped in authoritarianism and Marxist ideology. It's an ideology which is creeping into governments across the world. To quote Schwab himself when speaking about the Canadian Parliament, "We penetrate the cabinets. I know that half this cabinet, even more than half, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. It's true in Argentina, it's true in France, now with the president who is a young global leader," end quote. The World Economic Forum promotes globalist issues such as climate change, so-called systemic racism and sexism, and creating an online digital identity.
I think it's worth mentioning again that clip of Klaus Schwab speaking at the John F. Kennedy School of Government from 2017, where he's talking about penetrating the cabinets with young global leaders.
And I have to say, when I mention now names like Ms. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, so that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now. I mean, with the president, who is a young global leader, but...
In a now deleted video titled 8 Predictions for the World in 2030, the World Economic Forum claimed that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, a slogan that hits the same dystopian note as work makes you free and ignorance is strength. You don't have to be a political philosopher to figure out that if you own nothing, the state owns everything. There's a word for this. It's called communism. The World Economic Forum and its affiliates shamelessly promote the abolition of private property, a central facet of Karl Marx's demented utopian ideology which led to the deaths of tens of millions of people worldwide in the 20th century. To quote Margaret Thatcher, quote, "Communism never sleeps, never changes its objectives, and nor should we." No matter how sophisticated the World Economic Forum tries to make the abolition of private property around the world sound, the fantasies of Karl Marx always lead to the crushing of individuals' liberties and lives and the expansion of the state's tyranny and power. It is imperative that we pay close attention to the World Economic Forum and do all that we can to preserve liberty and reduce government intrusion in our lives. And if we fail to do so, the anti-democratic forces in the West will continue to march on, and we may wake up to an Australia that we no longer recognise. Australians deserve to know the extent to which the World Economic Forum's influence and infiltration of our country and how far it has gone